Welcome back, True Seeker. Before we get into the topic, which is very serious and coming down on a lot of people right now, I just want to say congratulations to a nice young couple out there who were just recently married and they met each other through this channel. I didn't know there was such a great love story out there in the Gematria community, but a couple that met through this work on this very channel, now married. They've been together, I guess, for about a couple years. Pretty quick to get married, but hey, not bad. Some people get married even faster. But again, even in the darkest of times, beautiful things can still happen. And it is the darkest of times right now. This is the darkest moment. We've all of us who are watching this, who are alive right now, this is the darkest moment in world history what's taking place. And a lot of people don't see it for what it is. But a lot of people under pressure right now to essentially give up sovereignty over their own body if they want to maintain their place in the world, their job, school, the ability to travel. Again, you got to get the old jab. And my mom's really sad right now. My sister, I knew my sister would get vaccinated. I mean, I'm sure my mom expected it too, but my sister and all of her children, so all four of her children, they all just got vaccinated recently. And, sweet lady just got bad news today at her internship. They told her she can only come back if she's vaccinated, and she's not going to do that. So sweet lady now has big choices to make. And again, there's all sorts of people in the world that are under the same kind of pressure. If you want to continue doing what you were doing within the system, then you're going to have to get the jab. And I've explained this before, you guys, but this system we live in, all of us live in and all of us participate in, it is the beast system. It is an evil system. And again, just to make a point, I mean, how does the United States stay on top of, the pyramid of power in the world? I mean, look how it does it. Military might. The things we benefit from in this nation is from essentially, the militarism all over the world, the dominating of other nations, the conquering of other nations, keeping them in a slave state so they can slave and labor for us and make cheap goods and products that we can benefit from. A pair of shoes that are relatively inexpensive for us over here, they can't even be afforded in these slave nations that make the shoes. Where sweet ladies from in Burma, if you want a pair of Nike tennis shoes, for your average job, you have to give up your whole month's salary just for one pair of shoes. So, if you made $500 a week here in the U.S., and most people make more than that, but I'm just saying, you'd have to give up your whole salary and then some. If you made $1,000 a week, you'd be able to afford one pair of Nike shoes, per month. You'd have to give up your whole month's salary. And again, the reason things are this way is because we in this nation have benefited the most from this beast system, this evil system that runs on militarism and killing people and conquering people and, plundering people and taking their resources. And most of the people of this nation have turned a blind eye to that reality, invading other nations for their resources. And, of course, it's really the people at the top who benefit the most from this beast system. And we all get exploited within it. But, again, as time goes on, we're all getting exploited more and more. And it's never been more evident. But for anyone who doubts what I wrote in the title that, the COVID-19 vaccination is on par with what's warned about in Revelation 13:18, the mark of the beast, 666, which you must accept to buy or sell. Again, it's not an accident, you guys, and it's not a coincidence, and it's not like, well, it's similar but not the same. It's pretty much the same. Look all these things up. These are all facts. May 15th, 2018. Clade X was the pandemic simulation put on by the same people who did the Event 201 coronavirus pandemic simulation 1 month before the outbreak. But go back and look at Clade X, May 15th, 2018. That was exactly 666 days before the pandemic was declared. 666. The pandemic was declared March 11th, 2020. May 15th, 2018, when Clade X, this pandemic simulation like what we're living out now, we're in the simulation, which you can still watch, vaccines are rushed out that hurt people. From that simulation to the pandemic, exactly 666 days. 666. And then remember, the whole contact tracing was HR 6666, and there's been even more. But the thing is, when you know gematria, the simple practice of coding numbers into words, you see things like vaccination is 666 in gematria. The way this works is you just take the alphabetic order A through Z, and you just count by 6. A is 6, B is 12, C is 18, D is 24. This is a common gematria cipher that's been around for longer than I've been on this planet, so don't accuse me of making this up. This has always been here. But vaccination 666. And isn't it strange that the word mandatory is 666? And isn't it strange that the word computer is 666 in light of the fact that Apple priced their first consumer computer at $666? And it's Apple and Google that collaborated right away with the government in the contact tracing. Also, don't forget, if you write out the phrase, number of the beast, if you write it out as words, and then get the gematria of it, it equals 258, like William Henry Gates, Bill Gates' first name. And don't forget, Bill Gates, who's very much the face of this agenda, he set up his vaccine alliance, Gavi, on July 12th, 1999, the year with 3 nines in it. Flip it upside down. What do you have? 666. If you've seen that movie with Schwarzenegger in the Catholic Church where they say 999 is the real number, I mean, I'm not into all that, but still, 9 and 6. Anyway, in 1999, on July 12th, which was Bill Gates' 258th day of his age, that was the day he set up his vaccine alliance. Number of the beast, 258. William Henry Gates, 258. You know, I wrote about all this in my book, and my book came out about a month before Bill Gates' father died last year. And what day did Bill Gates' father die? He died on September 14th, 2020, the 258th day of the leap year, in the time of the pandemic in 2020. And remember what 2020 was to Bill Gates. 10 years earlier, in 2010, in Switzerland, where the pandemic was declared out of, he declared a decade of vaccines. And he said in 10 years, which is 2020, he wanted there to be a push to vaccinate all the people of the world. So what happens in 2020? Exactly 10 years later, in January, his decade of vaccines pledge was January 2010. January of 2020, the first confirmed case of coronavirus in the world in Seattle, Washington. That was the first confirmed case in the world outside of mainland China. Just happened to be in Bill Gates' backyard, right? And remember, January is named after Janus, and you have this TV show out there, Utopia, about billionaires wanting to depopulate the world with a vaccine, which Bill Gates pretty much spelled out in 2010 at his TED Talk. Again, if you haven't seen Bill Gates' 2010 TED Talk, he says the best way to reduce human population is if we do a good job with vaccines. It's exactly what he says. Go listen to it if you've not heard Bill Gates' 2010 TED Talk. And again, there's no excuses in the information age. Type in Bill Gates 2010 TED Talk. It'll be right there. Take the time to watch it. Listen in your own words. He talks about why we need to reduce population, and his number one way to do it is with vaccines. So anyway, you just got to start to say, okay, wait a minute. They simulated something just like the pandemic 666 days before it was declared. Then remember, they did the follow-up simulation event 201, October 18th, 2019, the day the military World Games began in Wuhan, China, 1 month before the outbreak in Wuhan, China. And they did it on 10/18. It's Luke 10:18 in the Bible where Satan comes to earth. And with regards to 10:18 and 666, we just saw that with Lil Nas X. Lil Nas X put out the 666 pairs of blood soul sneakers with Luke 10:18 etched on the shoe. Again, if you've watched the Event 201 and Clade X simulations, which you can still watch online, they're done by the exact same group, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, the same vaccine companies that have out the vaccines. They have a makeshift CNN-type news anchor to make it seem realistic as they do the simulation, reading off the news and what's going on. And the news anchor's name is Gian Me Serve. Me serve. Again, the first tenet of Satanism is to serve yourself. So, It's not hard to see what we're living out. And then again, the other piece to understand is we know who's behind this. The Jesuit order is behind all of this, who serves the Catholic Church, who has a lot to do with how we know the Bible, such as 666. And there are certain Bible historians that contend that 666 is a mistranslation and it should say 616. I'm not going to argue about that, but I'm just saying, at the end of the day, it's the Catholic Church and Jesuits behind all this. So understanding why they would do the ritual this way is clear. It's all biblical. It's prophecy coming to pass, you know? The most powerful entity in the world, the Catholic Church, you know, who's convinced so many people that we're living in the end times, that we're going to see prophecy. There's a reason they do all this. They know a lot of the people of the world are completely ignorant to all this. Certain people are totally aware of it. And that's why you have the divisions you have in the world. And that's what they want. They want divided people. Divided people are conquerable people. And, you know, the people who aren't aware, it is that quote from the Bible. My people suffer for lack of knowledge. So, again, just headlines like today. Some vaccinated in U.S. are out of patience with those refusing the shot. This is speaking to the division, the programming. These same people who are this way are the same ones that watch the TV and listen to Anderson Cooper get up there each night and say things like, people who aren't vaccinated are essentially walking disease factories. 2 nights ago, Anderson Cooper said that if you're not vaccinated, you're not a responsible adult and you're not doing your duty as a citizen. And again, I put out a video responding to that. I mean, my duty as a citizen is to comply with cable news and a government that's been lying to me for my whole life. I mean, come on, man. No, that's not my duty. My duty as a human being is to overthrow this tyranny, and that's why I'm here every day doing what I have to do. And I told a lot of you guys a long time ago, if more people don't start doing what I'm doing, you know, escaping the matrix more and more, not participating in the matrix, not participating in the system, if more people don't do that, we're all going to go down with this system. This is what I've been preaching for years, and here we are. It is a time for a lot of people to take a brave stand, do something bold, and if we don't, again, we're already super late in the game. Eventually, there will be a point where it's the point of no return, and we really have to reach these people. You see, that's the thing. The people who already got vaccinated, they're not going to want to hear any of this at all, because now it's even more reason to have cognitive dissonance. But still, these people need to hear it. These people need to hear it. There needs to be a breakthrough. And the people who still haven't been taken by the agenda, they need to find the courage and the ability to stay strong. Because, you know, I mean, if everybody cowers and buckles down to this, I mean, there will be no room left for the people who have courage. They will be 86th from this society. And that's exactly what they want. That is exactly what they want. And again, that's only possible because of the people who march along with the tyrant's agenda, which is the majority. And that's been my concern ever since I was 18 years old and 9/11 happened. I saw how easy it was to get people to march to the drum of tyranny. It happened overnight after 9/11, and it's happened in the time of COVID. Okay. What I want to do now is I uploaded that Carrie Mullis video the other day. If you have not watched it yet, I just want to watch some of this Carrie Mullis interview. It's never been more relevant. Again, Carrie Mullis died right before the pandemic was declared in a very ritualistic way. He was an outspoken critic of Anthony Fauci and the medical establishment. And this interview we're going to watch is from the 90s when Bill Clinton was president. But you listen to it, I mean, it's just so relevant to what's going on today, and it shows. I mean, I learned a lot listening to it about the HIV/AIDS scam, but you listen to what they're saying, and it's like, oh my God, exactly what they did with HIV and AIDS is exactly what they've done with COVID. And again, it was Anthony Fauci who was the face of that. It's the Anthony Fauci who's the face of this, the Jesuit scum. And by the way, today, July 31st, today is the anniversary of the death of Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. He died on this day in 1556. He died 84 days from his birthday, and on the day leaving 153 days left in the year. Remember, Jesuit 84, Jesuit Order 153, Society of Jesus 56. Big numbers with the Jesuits, Perfect day for the founder of the Jesuits to die. Remember, Ignatius of Loyola equals 201 like the Jesuit order. You know what else equals 201? Indianapolis. And look at what's in the news today for our weekly Saturday national shooting. Again, every Saturday we get some shooting ritual. Again, Saturday has the same gematria shooting, but again, it's in 201 town, Indianapolis, on the death anniversary of Mr. 201 himself. And don't forget, Event 201 was the coronavirus pandemic simulation. On the same day, the military World Games began in Wuhan, China. Military World Games that were created by the Jesuit order, and that's why they began in Rome in 95 when the Jesuits were created to counter the 95 Theses and recognized by the Catholic Church on September 27th, the day leaving 95 days left in the year. But okay, with all that said, let's listen to Kary Mullis, who invented the PCR test. The PCR test that's now being used to diagnose people with COVID. If you have not watched this entire thing, it's 2 hours long. Take the time to watch all of it. I've listened to it several times this week just in the background while I'm doing my research. But I want to make sure people see this. And you don't have to watch the whole thing to get a lot. We're just going to start to watch it. I'm going to pause it here and there if I want to chime in. But again, this man, Kary Mullis, he died right before all this went down and realized, had he not died, he'd be here to speak out against Anthony Fauci, the way he's using his test to diagnose COVID-19. He would be the man to stop the agenda. And you know what's sick is they say he died from pneumonia, you guys. They say Kary Mullis died from pneumonia right before all this went down. COVID has all the exact same symptoms as pneumonia. But here we go.
Professor Kary Mullis is one of the most unique minds in America. He won the Nobel Prize. We did this interview late at night at his home on the ocean.
Hold on. I just got to pause real quick. I got to look to see if Gary Knoll is still alive, because Gary Knoll, this interviewer, is awesome too. I'd never heard of him before I saw this interview. Okay, thank God he's still alive. We need to get in contact with this guy. I want to hear what Gary Knoll has to say about what's going on right now, because just watch. I mean, both these guys are super impressive. So Gary Knoll. I feel like Gary Knoll better look out, man. Hold on, here we go.
Do you believe that we have made science our final arbiter on what is right? And as a result, we continue to look at science, and scientists hold themselves up to make the decision that this is right behavior, that's wrong behavior. You can do this, you can't do that.
It's a good question, and I think the answer is definitely that science, in a way, having led to this sort of decline of let's say the Protestant Church. I mean, the Protestants got a little bit too involved in history and left themselves open there for scientists to come in and say, to debunk Christianity, because it became a mythological kind of thing rather than a only by faith kind of thing. And, you know, it became it's not a real religion in the sense of like Buddhism or something. Science, having been involved in that, people said, well, we're not going to go to church anymore. It left a big hole in a lot of people's psychological makeup that has, I think, been filled to some degree by the ecological madness that people have got jumped into. And there, the scientists are, like you say, they are considered the final arbiters of what's good for the planet or what's bad for the planet. And they haven't got the slightest idea. Instead of wearing white robes, they wear white lab coats, you know. Instead of bringing you the word of God, they bring you the word of the EPA or whatever. And they don't have to understand what it is that they are making you do, in fact. And people, you know, I think they fall naturally into it because there is a need in humanity for something like a religion, something that makes you feel a part of some larger kind of group, something that you think, in spite of your wormy little life, makes you a part of something good, something big, something that makes sense.
But doesn't it also happen that when people were naturally evolving, it was necessary for them to take responsibility for a major part of their life. If they didn't, if they couldn't make their own decisions about their own sense of reality in significant ways, then they would have succumbed. Today, very few people make many decisions that are really significant. If they feel something's wrong, they go to a doctor. The doctor frequently will tell them, this is your condition, and this is how to treat it. People are not questioning innate knowledge or innate healing, and as a result, we've relied upon a pharmaceutical model for all of our healing. In fact, medicine doesn't mistrust nature, mistrust the person's own ability to have their own healing experience.
Well, I think people are still responsible for their decisions, and they still make them just like they always have, and they do it with insufficient information just like they always have. It's just that the world's a little different now than, say, 2 million years ago, when maybe it was a matter of, do we go down there with the family next door, or are we going to stay up here in the canopy, or whatever. I mean, the decisions that people make are important to their lives, and they certainly accede to authority a lot, but I think that's always been I don't know if there's no evidence in my mind for the time, from anthropological stuff, that there weren't always rulers and people that
we've always had a hierarchical order.
Right.
Even in the caves, we've had a hierarchical order. I believe in fact, my new book is just on that very topic, on life energies, where each born with a different life energy. I'm very concerned when the media publishes a story that came out recently in the New York Times and all the other papers, that now it's being mandated that there's going to be pregnancy tests to determine if mothers have HIV, if the babies have HIV, and then put the babies on antiretrovirals like AZT. Well, if you have a baby that has no developed immune system of its own, should be getting breastfed to develop an immune system, it's going to take many months, in fact several years, to really fully develop. And you go and start giving a child that's completely healthy, just has an antibody in their system, and you give them a toxic chemotherapy drug, and then we are not.
Is that going to be mandated by law?
That's what they're trying to do.
They're not that dumb, are they? I mean, they to mandate it. What state?
Well, they mandated vaccines. You can't get into some college. You can't have your kid go to school. You can't travel to certain countries unless you've had vaccines, and it's never been shown that vaccines can be predictive of who they're going to help and what the consequences of side effects are going to be for who it hurts.
Yeah, I'm a libertarian, true right to the heart, and I do not like to see freedoms eroded at all for whatever grand cause, and that would almost I can't believe that they would I can believe there would be some people in society that might like to do that, like that guy who used to be the head of the Surgeon General. He's written
C.W. Coop.
Yeah.
C.W. Coop. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a bit on the sort of like a little bit like a Nazi kind of a guy in a way. And although he has some redeeming social value. But the man is, just a little bit too much into. I mean, he thought everybody at the NIH should start wearing uniforms, and that kind of a personality is capable, I think, also of thinking, yes, and we do have the moral right to make you give your kid AZT because it's our job to protect your child, even if you don't want to. That
state agencies have taken kids away from parents when the parent, based upon informed knowledge, chose not to give their child either AZT or other chemotherapy agents, either for AIDS or cancer. And these were parents who knew more than the average parent, and based upon their knowledge made an informed choice, and those parents were deemed unfit and abusive parents, and their kids were put into a foster home.
You know what? In the early 20th century, actually, or late 19th century, in the South, pellagra was thought to be an infectious disease. There was a lack of niacin because Southerners were eating corn instead of wheat. The poor farmers were, and they were taking kids out of homes there, thinking it was an infectious disease because everybody in the family was getting it. Put the kids in an orphanage. In the orphanage, the kid would get a little bit of niacin because they'd have some wheat. And he wouldn't get pellagra, so it made real sense. Took some guy, it took him a government research station in South Carolina finally got some
Goldberg,
clever
was it?
Goldberg.
Goldberg.
Some Jewish guy came on with little brains and said, "Wait a minute, this is not an infectious disease." they had to throw out all the idiots that were running that. But it was a long time, and they did the same thing. They took kids out of homes. All they needed to do was bring in a little bread, a little whole wheat bread. And
does it bother you at all? Every time we need a decision made, we're always looking for some scientist to tell us what to do, whether it's on cancer or almost any issue, where science has become state religion.
It bothers me when I see like people. My mother's a good example of doing that. Sort of just, her doctors are never questioned at all, even though her son is sort of a medical person himself and sometimes disagrees with him. Because I'm her son, of course, I don't have any brains, and her little physicians are always telling her weird things. Yeah, it doesn't bother me so much. I like this planet. I'm not upset about it at all. I'm not a crusader. If I had my way, I would make a few changes, and I would make them slowly and carefully. I wouldn't make any radical kinds of changes. I would change science to be more just to be a little less responsive to central authority. Make it more like, if you're going to fund a scientist for something that he says, here's what I'll do for you. You give me $200,000 next year, and I'll do this. I think, well, okay, why don't you just give him the $200,000, let him do what he wants to with it. Don't make him tell you what he's doing. Don't make him convince his colleagues that what he's going to work on with it. If he's good enough to give it to him for one thing, just give it to him and let him decide, because you'll get a lot better science that way, and a lot more freedom for scientists to actually pursue their own goals, and a lot more discussion, which is a really important issue today, about what is the proper way to go about what particular problem. The way it's done now it's rather medieval, and it counts on the fact that it's not true anymore, that scientists never lie, that scientists will always be honest, and that they aren't each other's competitor, that they're each other's colleague. The way papers get published, the way grants get funded, all of that stuff is like ancient. It's the structure that worked in the 17th century maybe, but it doesn't work now. It works very, very much against science, which is, I think, one of the better institutions on the planet. Science is why we are sitting here with lights and stuff like that, empirical science, but not. It's almost always flourished better when dissent was expected and in fact encouraged. To have a central authority like the NIH making all the medical decisions is kind of ridiculous.
Very prone to political positions that it shouldn't be taking in science. That adulterates science.
Oh yeah, it very, very much. We knew, if we studied Hegel at all, that after the 60s there was going to be a swing back to a repressive government, right? It just was going to happen. There was nothing you could do to stop it, I don't think. It swung farther than I thought it would ever go, but we definitely got into it, and that's, the whole business of AIDS, if you want to look at it as in a big picture, AIDS is a Hegelian, it's the pendulum swinging back to the right, saying less permissiveness. People that don't pay attention to their grandmother's code of ethics are going to suffer for it. Right? And you can figure out all the little mechanisms of how that happened, but you can also just look at it in the big picture and say, yeah, that was going to happen. And now there's going to come a time pretty soon when it's going to go back the other way. Hopefully the swings. I'm afraid that Hegel.
You mean we can
not
start
right.
to have some sex and enjoy it? Not
Oh
feel
yeah,
good about it?
I never stopped. I said those guys aren't going to tell me what to do in my personal life. And I know enough about the details of it to where if somebody wants to debate me about it, I can do it. And I would always try to be informed before I would make that decision. But also, if you didn't know anything at all about the science of biology, and you just looked at it from a sociological point of view, you should have been ready for the 80s. It's going to happen. It always does. Now, Hegel I think he had the impression that the oscillations get less and less. It's sort of a damped pendulum. It finally settles on something that's great. I think he missed there. It's chaotic. It's like he had the wrong geometry. It's gonna, but it will go back and forth, and it will, because that's the way that is. In fact, it's probably important to the success of any species that it tries some experiments, but it never goes too far from something that has survived, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it as sort of it's an evolutionary standard in a sense. The idea that society will swing back and forth, experimenting a little bit, but then returning across some line that has worked in the past. You don't want to just keep going in one direction, because you might just end up falling off a cliff or off the edge of the earth.
You destabilize basic institutional control.
Stabilize basic institutional control. You mean as in the course of history?
Individuals can make radical adjustments in their own lifestyles. Institutions never do. There's never been major institutions that make radical shifts, because they'd be shifting their power base. The whole effort of an institution is to maintain its power and stability of power. So anything that threatens that stability is considered undesirable.
I would agree with that. But I mean, the institutions do go. They have this shifting sort of thing, but they don't go very far.
Very small.
I try to stay out of that stuff myself as best as I can.
But
personally,
look at this. This is Peter Duesberg, right?
Yeah.
Inventing the AIDS virus. Here's a man, the fair-haired scientist, who was considered a poster boy of science, right?
California Scientist of the Year in 1974, I think it was.
And now he's a pariah.
Not in this house.
No, but in this state and in that university, because when I filmed him in his laboratory
Absolutely.
3 years ago, the laboratory had no funding. Now he doesn't even have that laboratory.
I know. They've made it.
And he was
martyred
tenured.
him, basically.
He was tenured.
Yeah. Oh, tenured, and also one of the most brilliant people in, surely the most brilliant virologist, possibly the most brilliant molecular biologist around. Peter is a very scholarly person. In addition to being brilliant too, he's very careful. He doesn't say anything that he can't support, or usually. I mean, you can catch him in a weak moment, and he might say something that he can't support. But he was a really well thought of guy too, because of his ideas. The whole field. I mean, in cancer, he's the guy that led him into the whole oncogene thing. Big research bonanza. Anybody who could order a little kit from some company and hire a couple of technicians could be a cancer researcher, because of things that Peter opened up. And then Peter said, no, I don't think that's actually the cause of cancer. And that made those guys a little bit angry. And then he comes along and does the same thing for AIDS. He said, I think we're on the wrong track here. And for some reason, the second time, it was almost like nobody even had to argue with him. Oh, it's just Peter again, ruining our fun, telling us that all this easy research stuff that we know we can do now for years, and the American people will pay for it, that we shouldn't be doing that. And Peter did that again. He did that twice. We need a lot more Peters. We don't have enough people like him, and the system doesn't really. It doesn't work. It doesn't work to produce people like that. Yeah.
Peter has been marginalized. The media will not quote him without having a challenge quote.
Yeah.
Where there was a time when whatever he said was, like any other major scientist, would have been accepted on its face value. Now he is considered the controversial. They always preface the controversial,
Oh yeah.
ex-professor.
Nature states just over and over again, if Peter Duesberg can be shown to be an idiot, then HIV causes AIDS. That's what the argument comes down to in a lot of the media. It has nothing to do with, they don't talk about the issues at all. Nobody has ever come up with the arguments that need to be brought up to decide whether HIV has any effect on anything.
But let's just look at a few of those arguments for a few moments. If they are right, they meaning the NIH, NCI, Gallo, Fauci, if they're right, then their predictions should be right also, that we would have a pandemic worldwide, an epidemic in America, an infectious disease, sexually transmitted, that hetero and homosexual equally be susceptible to. That's their first argument. Based upon that, everybody got terrified. You mean we could get sex, have sex and get AIDS and die, then we put the big chill on promiscuity in any form, and then we started making accusations about who caused this and then started blaming. Has any of those initial predictions come true?
Well, HIV, according to the CDC, if you look at and this is, anybody can buy the annual medical yearbook from Britannica, $39 or something like that, and look in there and see, and there's always an article in there about AIDS, and it's usually there's somebody from CDC giving a number, saying here's the number of North Americans infected with this virus. The article's usually prefaced, the headlines is HIV spreads into some new area, right? Spreads into heterosexuals, spreads into women, spreads into teenagers. But the number's always been the same since they started measuring it and estimating the number of North Americans infected by this virus. It has remained constant at approximately 1 million for 10 years. That is not an epidemic.
Now it's
okay. They had to drop it because they had realized all the false positives were ruining. Were starting to really mount up when they got into a population that did not have a lot of positives, and then the false positives become predominant. And you know what? This is the craziest thing I've ever. I cannot believe it. When you find a kid like a 19-year-old boy from Montana who's joining the Air Force, he turns up HIV positive, and he's not been around the block too often. Nobody's ever bothered to check his mother to see if his mother is also HIV positive, in spite of the fact that we all know that if a mother is HIV positive, there's a 20 to 30% chance that all of her offspring will be. Right? I mean, everybody accepts that. But for some reason, they can't see the simple reverse of that and say, wait a minute, this kid in Montana who's raised on a farm or something, who's HIV positive, probably didn't get it from, hanging out in the bathhouses in LA. He got it somewhere. Why don't we just look at his mother and see if he got it? Because all you need is about 10 or 15 mothers of 19-year-old boys that have HIV and did when the kid was born to blow that theory right out of the water. No one's ever done that work. I don't understand why.
I contacted the CDC and I asked them, did you do blood workups on all the people that you claimed were included in the AIDS figures from day one? The answer was no.
No, they didn't.
About 25% of those figures were based upon symptoms. Then I said,
yeah. A presumed diagnosis of HIV. That was just like,
and I said, but if you're presuming it's HIV, hence AIDS, you must presume then that you have a gold standard. Nothing else could have caused the same symptoms. And I said, there are at least 7 other...
Friendly fun.
Yeah. And I said, there are at least 7 other diseases that have the same identical symptoms of AIDS, such as tuberculosis and malaria, and also cytomegalovirus in its advanced stage and tertiary syphilis. And I was going through some of the diseases I had found that have this, and they kind of shrugged their shoulders and didn't address the issue at all. They just avoided it. Then I asked them about Africa, and I said, no. And in this documentary, there's 5 countries in Africa that have, that you will see where doctors who've spent much of their life in Africa, their whole life as professional physicians in Africa, haven't seen a single case of AIDS.
Right. No, the African thing is a big joke. I mean, it's a bad joke, but it is a joke.
In the epicenter, they're saying, yes, we have malaria and we have TB, and they're not being treated because we're not getting any money, and they can be prevented and we can cure these people. We don't have fresh drinking water, they're drinking, and you'll see in the film, people drinking right out of septic water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll see human debris right on the water. They scoot it aside and drink the water, and then they get parasites and they get diarrhea. Well, if you drank out of infected feces water, you're going to get diarrhea, and you're going to get tuberculosis in that environment, and you're malnourished, and you're going to have a dry, non-productive cough, lose about 10% of your body weight, and you're going to be classified as AIDS. And he says, but if we give money for AIDS, then suddenly you'll see these new cars driving through the highways here with loads of condoms and pamphlets, but not a single antibiotic to help anyone with tuberculosis or AIDS or with
the World Health Organization has.
Oh, okay. So again, just to make sure everybody's grasping that point, he's saying, look, we know what all the disease and illness is in Africa, and there's no resources to help treat those problems. But now all of a sudden we're pretending like that's not the problem, and now there's this new thing, AIDS, that has all the symptoms of this, so it's super similar. But if you say it's AIDS, then they'll rush in with the resources. But look at what the resources are, right? The resources are condoms and other products which benefit certain companies, right? So now you have the AIDS medicine, you have the AIDS solutions. So there's a group of companies that benefit from that because they have the products that go with this, right? Just like what we said with our COVID prediction, we said, well, look, COVID has all the same symptoms as the flu and the cold and pneumonia. And I said, this is over a year and a half ago now. I was saying, are they going to phase out the flu and make everything COVID and then you need an annual COVID shot? And now all the companies for years that, have treated flu, they'll be seen as, that's not relevant anymore. We just need the stuff that treats COVID. Well, who's profiting off COVID? You know what I mean? Again, these are schemes and plans and agendas that benefit certain people. And again, it's not about benefiting the sick people. It's about benefiting the people who make the products and control the narrative. And again, remember, Anthony Fauci's behind the whole HIV/AIDS thing. He's the face of that as well. And now he's the face of COVID. And it's just, this is history repeating itself. What makes me sad is I never heard about any of this growing up, and HIV/AIDS. It's one of those things where throughout school they pound it home into your brain. How many times did you learn about HIV/AIDS growing up? How many jobs have you had where you had to do a HIV/AIDS class or even at school? Again, this is something they really want us to know about. And a long time ago I started to wonder if it's overblown and STDs as a scare is also overblown. STDs do exist. But, just from living, it's just like, well, based on how much fear there is about these things, I feel like with the way I was when I was younger, I should have a whole bunch of STDs and HIV/AIDS, but that's not the case, So, again, this was more fear and control, and realize this came at the beginning of the 80s after the sexual revolution and all this pushing of, again, after the sexual revolution, the 60s and the 70s, So, again, he's talking about that pendulum and them controlling the thing. Okay, they did this experiment here. Now they're going to curb it back by scaring people about sex. But again, it's all agendas at the end of the day that benefit the people that are orchestrating the agendas. So let's continue.
It's totally messed up. Following the lead of the NIH. And those things, the article...
And if you don't know, NIH, National, Institute of Health, that's what Anthony's been the head of since 1984, the infamous year.
I read this article it was a year ago, I think, in Nature, that I could not believe that it was in there. It had about 10 or 15 doctors with their names on it. They studied the prostitutes in some little Eastern African country right above Liberia. I forgot the name of it. It's a coastal country. They had gone there 5 years before and found that 75% of the prostitutes were HIV positive. They predicted if they came back in 5 years, half of them would be dead, right? So they come back in 5 years and there's no bodies to count. There's no dead prostitutes to do autopsies on. They're still HIV positive according to their tests, which has cross-reactivity with all kinds of things. And their conclusion in the paper was that when that should have told them right there, I said, wait a minute, HIV doesn't seem to be hurting these people. The conclusion was these people have got this is in Nature, a special strain of HIV, which, number one, does not cause any disease. Number two, it protects you from the strains that are rampant throughout Africa that do cause disease. And we ought to study these people further because we might be able to develop a vaccine out of this. That was published in Nature. And it is on its face. Even a sixth grader, I think, looking at the logic there, would say, wait a minute, these guys, the emperor has no clothes here. There's something serious wrong with the mind of these people. They come in with a conclusion, and they just won't ever examine it. They don't, and when they see direct evidence that their conclusion is wrong, they just make up some ridiculous thing like that. And the WHO gives them money to come back there, and they probably have nice hotels on the beach there. But and doctors like to go on little vacations to collect blood, things like that, which don't take a lot of time, and then take it back home and study it for all year. And
When they said
And I just got to pause. The reference he used is the same reference I've been using the exact same time about COVID. The emperor wears no clothes. Again, that story was so important that most of us had read to us in school growing up. And it's almost like that was told. I guess I was like, I was saying it's like they taught us that to be prepared for this moment, to see through the obvious lie. But again, history repeats itself, and this has all been done before. It's getting a lot more drastic with COVID.
That it was, remember about 4 years ago, they said that AIDS is now becoming an epidemic in the black community. And that all these black...
And again, just targeting black people, just like with COVID. They're saying if you got darker skin, you need to go out and get the vaccine. It's going to hit you the hardest. Always just targeting, darker complected people with these agendas. It's just it's by the book what they do.
Women, heterosexuals also, that's when it started to make its move. They suddenly became heterosexuals, but they said it was black heterosexuals. So I went into the hospitals in Connecticut, in Pennsylvania, and started contacting hospitals around the United States. Not inner city hospitals, regular hospitals. Couldn't find any cases of AIDS or HIV infected babies. I went to Hall Hospital in Brooklyn, which is exclusively inner city, very depressed, poor people, and a lot of intravenous drug users. And I spoke with I spoke with several of the physicians, including one of the head of pediatrics, and the woman said, yes, we have a lot of women who come in here who are IV drug users. They're malnourished, they've got tuberculosis, they would normally be dead if we didn't get them off the street and give them some treatment. Because normally drug users who are heavy mainline, they die. They've always died. They're not in optimal health. And she said, yes, the babies will be positive, and most are black. So hence, they take one hospital and they make all the statistics from that hospital as if it related to all the blacks in America. Well, you're dealing with less than 1/100th of 1% of blacks in the total country, but you make that suddenly represent a population group. And how you manipulate that statistic by not showing that it's all hospitals and it's all blacks.
And just to pause right there, how many people have seen this year Bill Gates, posing, and he has a stack of books, and he has the book about how statistics can be used to lie. I mean, that just makes me sick about everything going on. Just so much Bill Gates mockery. Just Bill Gates, the computer guy, from computer viruses to viruses and vaccines. It's a joke. And again, his birthday is the same day as Jonas Salk's, the polio vaccine. Again, Bill Gates turned 1 the day that Jonas Salk turned 42, and Gematria vaccine equals 42. That same day happened to be the day Elvis got the polio vaccine on live TV, exactly 42 weeks after his birthday. Then the COVID vaccine went live in 2020 on Bill Gates' 42nd day of his age, the man who operates out of the 42nd state, Washington. Anyway.
And that these are IV drug users. Suddenly the IV drug user becomes representative of heterosexual transmission.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't understand why no one's challenging this.
I've been challenging it, but it's not real loud because this is the first time PBS has come into my house and said, hey, what do you think about this? I've had to fight really hard, to get anybody. Usually I would go to until this year, when things are slowly starting to change, I think people are starting to realize this is serious, and these guys have got big woolen bags over their heads or something. They've been fooling us. They know. The people that are AIDS researchers now are getting neurotic if you ask them any questions. There was a time when I first started asking questions, all I wanted was, where are the papers? Just tell me the papers that you read that convinced you that HIV was the cause of AIDS, because I need to reference those papers in I was working on a test for HIV with PCR, and I needed to write a little report to the NIH and say, here's the progress we've made. And the first line of it was, HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. And I thought that was true. This is before I got involved. And I said, what's the reference for that quote? And I looked for it for about 2 or 3 years, and I never could find it. And by the end of 2 years, I'd ask everybody.
Okay, and let's just stop right there. It's like here we are almost 2 years into COVID, right? And there still isn't any hard evidence. There's no isolated strains. I mean, all there is media information. Just all this information put out on the news that shifts with the wind about COVID, but there's no hard data anywhere to prove what COVID is. You know what I mean? And again, what they're saying about AIDS, he's like, okay, there's all these statements and, figureheads saying this, but then you ask people what's behind that, and they don't have an answer. And again, COVID. It's just so easy to say. I mean, you guys, from the beginning, they told us that COVID had all the symptoms of what we already associated with typical seasonal sickness. I mean, there wasn't one thing about COVID that stood out from the typical cold, flu, pneumonia. And some people are like, well, I heard that COVID makes it so you can't taste or smell. And it's like, okay, were you born yesterday? When you're sick, you often lose sense of taste and smell. I mean, come on, people.
Buddy, at every meeting that I'd gone to that talked about AIDS, I'd ask, I'd look through every computer database. There is no reference. There is nobody who should get credit for that statement. And that's a pretty weird situation in science, where getting credit for a discovery is the most important thing in your life as a scientist. You want your work to be associated with you, especially if it's got to do with something that's so important in the world that they're spending billions of dollars on it. We ought to know who was it that should get credit for pointing out to us that HIV was the probable cause of AIDS. And probable is not a very powerful word, but there is no such person. There is no paper, there's no group of papers. They can say, well, it's in there somewhere, but it's not in there somewhere.
Gallo couldn't find it for you?
Gallo wouldn't talk to me, but Montagnier couldn't find it for me. Montagnier said, why don't you, after, first they say, look at the CDC report. Okay, they're talking about the bulletin of mortality and morbidity that comes out every couple of weeks. That's not a scientific publication in the sense of here's the data, here's the arguments, here's the conclusion. That's just a little thing that goes to doctors and say, when you see somebody come into your office with this kind of symptoms, you report it to us because it's possibly this or that kind of thing. It's not a scientific thing. It's not where the guy that wrote that bulletin that month doesn't get the Nobel Prize for having discovered that HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. Right? I mean, it's ridiculous to quote that thing. And then I said, I told him, I read that. I didn't think that was very. I mean, I'm talking about where did science come by the notion? Who brought that up? Who showed it to us? Who explained it to you? Where did you come up with the idea? He said, well, there's this SIV stuff. And I said, yeah, but that was last month. We've known this for a long time. Who is responsible for us knowing it? Don't we want to know that person's name? He walked away. I figured that was the last person I ever asked. So I asked a whole lot of people in that 2 or 3 years when I was certain at first that there must be an answer. Wasn't it, I was in a different field, so I figured the virologists had that one taken care of, but they didn't. There wasn't a soul, and there still isn't. And the more you ask them, you can get thrown out of a dinner party. I mean, you sit around go to some virologist's house and start talking about questions like that. Or even, people that aren't virologists, people that are just ordinary people that are completely ignorant of the detail will get mad at you if you start talking about the fact that AIDS may not be caused by HIV. Just say something simple like, it may not be caused, because I can't find any evidence that it is. These people that are being treated with AZT, a fairly lethal drug if you take enough of it, they may be taking the drug to kill them. I mean, you think the Oklahoma bomber is a bad guy, right? There's nobody in the United States that doesn't think the guy that killed those 200 people in Oklahoma for no good reason, shouldn't be sentenced to death, probably. I think we all agree if he did it, he ought to be killed. Now, is it not criminal, just as bad, and maybe worse, to sentence a whole lot of other people? I mean, these people, they're
I just got to chime in just for information's sake. Again, Timothy McVeigh, who's blamed for the Oklahoma City building bombing. Don't forget, Timothy McVeigh equals 201. And again, the governor of Oklahoma at the time of the bombing, his brother wrote the book, The Final Jihad, before it happened, where there's a man named Tom McVeigh in the book that blows up the same building in the same way, using a moving truck packed with explosives. Ask yourself how that can be written in a fictional book by the brother of the governor, Tom McVeigh, and then it ends up being Tim McVeigh 201. And if you ever look up that book, The Final Jihad, see if they still have it in libraries. They had it. I showed it physically on a camera back when I first started these videos. I had it checked out from the Seattle library. Should have bought that book. I'm sure you still can, but it's huge, The Final Jihad. But yeah, again, just Jesuits, you guys, Jesuits. Like he said, if he did it. I mean, did he do it? He was a military guy. He's probably a, military mind control weapon for the psyop that became. But anyway, back to this.
are people dying just because of AZT. I mean, that's proven in big studies like the Concord study. The conclusion of the Concord study was this stuff is not good for you. You know, the little skeleton on the little crossbones, the skeleton and crossbones on the bottle says probably wouldn't be a good idea to take this stuff unless you got a good reason to. Now, I would say that probably, there've been, I don't know how many of the people who have died, so-called of AIDS, have actually died of AZT, because it certainly would wreck your immune system to take that stuff for a few years. It's like if you started taking any other chemotherapeutic agent for the rest of your life, it would be that agent probably that killed you. You know, when you give chemotherapy to somebody with cancer, you give them a round of it for maybe 14 days or a few days. Hopefully you're not going to kill the patient, you're going to kill the cancer. The patient's going to survive. But you don't keep giving it to him until he dies, because he certainly will. And AZT is just like those things. It's a little more lethal than most of the anti-cancer things that people take for that. Everybody.
So, and again, let's just listen to what he's talking about. He's talking about how the drug that they're using to treat this at the time is killing the people, right? What was going on with people who got put in the hospital with COVID? They got put on ventilators, and the ventilators were killing people. You had nurses and doctors speak out, risk their whole job. Also, people did it online using social media saying, it's like we're sentencing people to death with our treatment in here, So, again, just so many of these things, just like, history repeating itself, but on a much bigger scale.
Everybody knows that those things, you wouldn't want to just keep taking them until you died. Why would they? I mean, how can somebody say, take this drug? It's not making you well, by the way. It's making you feel terrible. But we don't have anything else to give you, and this is going to cost you $8,000 a year. And
because someone postulated that the AZT would stimulate T cells, and then it was shown that it did not stimulate T cells, that it was, in a healthy way, that it was causing the body to have a hyperimmune reaction.
I didn't know somebody thought it was going to stimulate T cells. I thought they figured it was going to kill that virus, because it's going to terminate DNA reproduction.
Yeah, that's what it does.
And it certainly does that, and it does that quite well in a lot of places that are not viral. I mean, it does that in normal any rapidly growing tissue, just like any other chemotherapeutic type agent.
Hypothetical situation. How many, let's assume for a moment that HIV is the cause of AIDS, just for argument's sake.
Okay.
Right? How many HIV cells are there generally compared to healthy cells?
You mean how many cells are infected by the virus in somebody that's fairly...
Yes.
The numbers vary wildly around, all kinds of... I wouldn't never say... I mean, there used to be a time when people said 1 out of 10 to the fourth, then they went to 1 out of 10 to the... There's some papers that say 1 out of 10, 1 out of 100. It's not like it's got them all, for sure. And I don't think that means it can't cause the disease, though, because, it could do something subtle, and it might not have to be in every cell. It's just that there isn't any evidence for that. And,
Well, what is the benefit of killing 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 healthy cells to kill one sick cell?
Well, if that one sick cell had something property about it that was going to get you.
But has that been shown to be the case?
Well, if it was, let's say you had a way of when you try to kill cancer cells, you kill a lot of healthy cells too. It's not a very effective treatment, but the argument is you got nothing else to do. You're going to try to kill the cancer. Hopefully it's more susceptible to the chemical than the healthy cells. Now, in this case, they have the same argument, except for the fact that they say you're going to keep on using this drug knowing that it's killing your healthy cells until you die. You're not going to take it for 2 weeks and then hope that you've killed all the HIV and now you will be alive. It's not like that. They said, no, we're going to do the same thing that we do to cancer, but we're just going to keep on doing it until you die. And hopefully it's going to prolong your life. Well, if it doesn't prolong your life, what they look for is surrogate markers. Now, have you heard that term battered about? Surrogate markers means, well, it doesn't seem to do anything for the disease, but it does every now and then do something for the level of CD4 cells that we measure, or it does something for this or that. Not that anybody really knows whether you want more or less CD4 cells at any particular time in your life. A lot of diseases cause CD4 to go up. A lot of diseases cause it to go down. Nobody's even sure if a CD4 cell is always a CD4 cell. It's a marker on the cell at the time that they do this little counting procedure, which is to stick a fluorescent tag on there and say the ones that light up have CD4 on the outside. And we don't really know what those cells do. The immune system is incredibly complicated. And the immunologists' brains are not nearly complicated enough to deal with it. We have these little, there are theories all over the place, but no real competent immunologist would tell you that CD4 levels was a surrogate marker for anything until we know more about it. But that's what they're using. That's what the FDA is saying. Yeah, you don't have to show that it helps them. These protease inhibitors, the same thing. You don't have to show that it helps the patient. You don't have to show a single life saved. All you have to do is show some little clinical indicator has changed in a way that somebody is hoping is going to make you better. It's a round
I took a
argument.
group of individuals who were HIV positive, husband and wife. They've both been intravenous drug users for about 8 years. Put them on a detoxification program, gave them a protocol under a physician where they were using ozone, vitamin C drips, bitter melon several times a day, liver flushes, blood cleansing with a lot of chlorophyll-rich juices, and glutathione intravenous. At the end of 1 year, the woman seroconverted to negative, and her T cells went from around 400 to 1200. The husband's were at 0. Both are ideally healthy. There's not a single opportunistic infection. Not only that, there's no indicator infections. For instance, they had cytomegalovirus, they don't have it. Herpes, they don't have it. Herpes 6 and mycoplasma don't have it. So here's two people. He's a construction worker, right?
Yeah.
Totally healthy. She's totally healthy. He has 0 T cells. She has a lot of T cells. Hers went up, his went down. And so clearly in this case, the T cells were irrelevant.
Nobody was counting those cells with those the markers like CD4, CD2, CD8, that kind of stuff. Those had just become available to Gottlieb, I think is the guy that did it in Los Angeles, as AIDS came about. Okay, he had about 5 patients that were AIDS patients. His personal research interest was in using these new antibodies, OK4, OK8, that somebody in Japan had made that could distinguish types of T cells. That was just a research interest of his. He wanted to see what they would tell him. You know what they did. And then they came up with names for them, like helpers and suppressors and that kind of stuff later. But they really didn't know. They didn't have any experience. There was no experience. There was no log of what a CD4 level meant before AIDS came along. And then they decided low CD4, bad. High CD4, good. Go to the Andes and look at somebody who's never had an infectious disease. I'll bet you they don't have any CD4 cells at all. They don't need them probably. They maybe have a couple waiting. But we don't know those kind of.
I took a group of
details
marathon
about
runners who were terribly healthy, never had any risk factors at all. Vegetarian, and they were running a marathon. All of their CD4 cells were very low. In fact, so low, even though they were totally healthy, getting ready for the marathon, that had they gone in with any kind of experience of a symptom and someone measured their blood, they'd have said, oh, you're a candidate for AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many conditions. Cytomegalovirus will bring your CD4 down. Epstein-Barr virus, ubiquitous in our population, 90% of the public have this. Herpes will bring your CD4 down. Malaria brings your CD4 down. TB throws them clear down into the cellar. So when something is so inaccurate, to make that a gold standard, that concerns me. Also,
well, it's ridiculous is what it is, and the question really is whether it should be considered criminal behavior on the part of people who have the public trust. It is criminal behavior to set off a bomb in a federal building. Is it criminal behavior to start passing out poisons to people who have no real diagnosable diseases, to babies, for instance? And the question, I think we get off in the details a lot in this thing, and it has been probably the worst part of it from the point of view of the public. There's only one real question that's relevant, and you don't have to think about CD4 cells, you don't have to think about all these other diseases with Latin names and stuff. You have to think about one thing. Who is it? And where is the paper that he wrote it down in who figured out that HIV was the cause of AIDS? Right? Who is that guy? If there's no person who can stand up in front of a scientific body and say, I'm that person, or this team of us did that, and here's how we showed it, You know, you don't have to get into the details. You don't have to worry about the hemophiliacs in Africa. You don't have to worry about all the sort of subterfuges in a way that just keep coming up to complicate what is really a very simple situation. Here we have a bunch of people that are definitely sick for some reason. It's likely that their behavior was so radically different than the behavior that had gone. It was an experimental kind of behavior in a way. It's not unlikely that they would have some kind of problems, some health problems. People stop sleeping and eating. People start using all kinds of substances instead of food. And they're associating with the world is getting more and more densely populated, and we're spreading more and more diseases around. It's not totally shocking that those people should come down with some diseases that'll kill them. So we don't need to postulate that there was an infection going on, since nobody actually did show that there was. What's the fuss? Why do we have to even think about CD4? Why do we have to think about, all the details that they keep mercilessly bringing up? Why do we have to think about the whole genome of this little organism that has not yet been shown by anybody definitively, or even really probably, to cause a disease? What is it? What is it about humanity that wants to go to all the details and stuff and listen?
Again, just what he's saying right now, you guys. It's like what they do is they take things that are hard to prove or disprove, an area that's relatively unknown, the invisible world, the world of, germs, things that are, microscopic. And then they put these people on there, supposedly experts, telling you and saying this is the reason why. But then there's nothing really behind what they're saying other than the media holding them up as the expert and source of the information that everyone should listen to. And again, I mean, it's exactly like what's going on right now. This is what they do. It's just they are the authority. So they control the narratives that get set within society. And this is why people need to identify the power that is doing this, and it needs to be stopped. And we've done that in this community. I mean, it's the Jesuits all day. They need to be done away with. And remember, even at the beginning, he started to even mention cancer, and he was saying the same guy who wrote the book saying AIDS is a farce is the same guy that was saying we're way off the mark on cancer. Well, remember who's responsible for cancer as we understood it. It's all Jesuit-educated people. The Jesuits have created our understanding of the world as we know it, especially in the world of science and medical science. And again, it's the thing to control because it's life and death, right? It's life and death, it's fear, and fear's the weapon to steer people. And that's what they're doing. They're steering human behavior with essentially just rumor making. I mean, isn't that kind of what it is? If there's no TVs or radios or magazines and newspapers, does anyone know right now that there's a pandemic going on? I mean, I looking out the world, people wouldn't all be covered up in masks, the TV told them to. I wouldn't see anything different in the world. I mean, again, some elderly people. Remember, that's what it was when they locked down the nation. They locked down this nation when the only death was an elderly person in a nursing home in Kirkland. Oh, shit! Whoa, pandemic, an 80-year-old died in a nursing home? Oh my God. Let's just end our way of life and give up all of our rights and liberties because Anthony Fauci said this is a real serious thing that an 80-year-old died in a nursing home. I mean, they control the world with lies and just by being the authority, the self-appointed authority that so many people have accepted as their authority. I don't accept government or media as my authority, never have. I've always seen right through it. And more people need to learn to be the same way. But here we go again.
Guys like Fauci get up there and start talking, he doesn't know anything really about anything. And I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine, and he should not be in a position like he's in. Most of those guys up there on the top are just total administrative people, and they don't know anything about what's going on at the bottom. But the simple...
And you guys hear that he's talking about Anthony Fauci right now. He's saying this about Anthony Fauci.
The simplest person on the planet can say, well, if we know that this disease is caused by HIV, how do we know that? Who figured it out?
And again, I got to make the point. When the pandemic was declared March 11th, 2020, that was Anthony Fauci's 79th day of being 79 years old, Society of Jesus 79, right? It was also 78. You could either say it was 78 days after his birthday or his 79th day of his age. Remember, Jesuit 78, Wuhan coronavirus 78. But again, the Jesuit scum Fauci, who's been the head of NIH since 84, it's not hard to see who's creating this world of make-believe and fear and confusion to control. This is how the Jesuits operate.
Is it in the Bible, you know? Or is it in the Journal of the American Medical Association? Is it in some place where we can all look at it? That's what science is supposed to do. It's empirical science. That's what we do.
I ask, I think, a more fundamental question. If you're saying that HIV, not you, but rhetorically to the scientific community, saying HIV is the cause of AIDS, then are you saying that HIV by itself is the cause of AIDS? They say yes. Then I say, show me where any study has ever been published where HIV by itself has caused any illness at all. Now you're saying it causes 29 illnesses, including Kaposi sarcoma. And I say, show me the evidence that in the absence of any other risk factor, any other antigen, HIV causes Kaposi sarcoma.
I think they've given up on Kaposi's. I mean, they can't. You can propagate Kaposi's in mice, and you don't happen to get HIV following you. Yeah. But I mean, that one is probably an alkyl nitrite kind of a problem. I think even Gallo himself.
But that was originally what they hung the hat of.
Oh yeah, on. Sure.
Kaposi's and pneumocystis. Those were the 1-2 combinations.
And you can get pneumocystis. You know how you give pneumocystis to a rat if you want to. Put him on a low-protein diet and give him some steroids for about 6 weeks, and he'll get pneumocystis. These guys were doing that same thing: low-protein diet and a lot of steroids. I mean, all kinds of steroids, and that's the known way. I mean, that's what the people that study pneumocystis. That's the way they produce a rat model for pneumocystis. It's like, but you don't. Again, like I don't think it's worth my time to worry about the details in this thing, because the really big fact is missing. Why do we think, just because Bob Gallo gets up, takes his sunglasses off and says, "Gentlemen, you discovered the cause of AIDS." That's all we have. New York Times article, CDC report, that's all we have. That's not enough.
Listen to what this is if you guys don't know, Kerry Mullis is a Nobel Prize winning scientist, and he's saying, listen, this whole big agenda and all we have is the CDC making some claims with no evidence behind it, and the New York Times, and remember, it's clear that the New York Times has always been run by the Jesuits. The CDC couldn't be any more Catholic, established on July 1st in 46, Catholic 71, 46. Hello, what they just did with Biden. You know, number 46, election called for him on 7-1 after the staged insurrection simulated at Jesuit Georgetown. But, yeah, it's just same old, same old.
It's not enough to that is not sufficient to like publish even a meager little scientific paper somewhere. That isn't enough for scientists to believe some inconsequential fact about some star 50 light years away. That's certainly not enough.
And I love how he makes that reference too. Just like more bullshit that's in science. When I was a kid in school and they're teaching us about light years and this is this many light years away and how big a light year is, I'm like, how the fuck would anybody figure this out and measure it? This sounds like a load of shit. Why does any of this even fucking matter? And that's because it is. Our whole lives we're getting loads of shit dumped on us. That's like somebody's theory that can be proven with this mathematical model supposedly. But it's like, what the fuck does this have to do with anything? And even when they used to measure the speed of light and tell you what the speed of light is, I'd say, like, who came up with the tool to measure something that fast? I mean, has anybody observed anyone measuring the speed of light? Again, to me, all this stuff is bullshit. But then there's a number assigned to it, and, it's in a textbook, and so it's a fact. 9/11 caused by the man in the caves in a book, so what, it's a fact? Are they putting COVID now in history books, so it's a fact? I mean, again, our whole lives we're just given all this information that really, if you think about it, doesn't make any sense. Light years, speed of light, bullshit. I call bullshit on all of it. I've been calling bullshit on all of it since high school.
Crete, at the cost of billions of dollars a year, and at the cost of a lot of lives and anguish, and just destroyed, lives have just been totally ruined by this thing on the basis of some flimsy little statement made by a guy who's known to be a crook in lots of other ways. He lied about a whole lot of other stuff. Why are we trust him there? He was a witness in a courtroom. We wouldn't trust his testimony. We've caught him in too many lies. You don't trust him anymore. We don't trust. We don't trust Gallo. We don't trust him. Nobody should trust Gallo. Gallo's been caught too many times making up stuff. Okay, who do we trust? Fauci. Fauci doesn't know enough to, If Fauci wants to get on television with somebody who knows a little bit about this stuff and debate him, he could easily do it because he's been asked. I mean, I've had a lot of people, president of the University of South Carolina asked Fauci if he'd come down there and debate me on the stage in front of the student body because I wanted somebody who was from the other side to come down there and balance because I felt like, well, these guys can listen to me, but I need to have somebody else down here that's going to tell them the other side. But Fauci didn't want to do it. He didn't want to talk about it.
So again, this man wanted to debate Anthony Fauci on where's the connection with HIV and AIDS besides your guys' claims? Where is the evidence? And he wouldn't do it. I mean, imagine he's alive today and he wants to debate about COVID. You know it would already be the same thing. And then I got to show you guys the way Kary Mullis went out. Kary Mullis supposedly died from pneumonia, which is pretty much what COVID is. And just look at how Jesuit the ritual was. He died 222 days after his birthday. Remember how big this number was? Again, if you have not read my book, 9/11 to Coronavirus, there's a whole chapter on 222 in the pandemic. It's the number that brings together 9/11 and coronavirus. But he died 222 days after his birthday on August 7th, which is written 7/8 in the majority of the world. Wuhan coronavirus 22278, Jesuit 78, right? And he died on a date with 54 numerology, 72 days before event 201. Remember, in our base ciphers, Jesuit order got the 5472, and look at this. Look at what other numbers factor in here. To his upcoming birthday, 144 days, the span. From his death to his upcoming birthday was a span of 144 days. Again, Jesuit order, also 144. And he died at the age of 74, right before the event 201 coronavirus pandemic simulation. And again, from pneumonia is what they say, which is just the ultimate mockery because it's so clear that COVID, I mean, who wants to tell me how COVID's different than pneumonia? How? Pneumonia, probably the biggest killer of elderly and sick because of what it does. And it attacks the lungs. It's just, it's in your face. Okay.
Based upon the HIV equals AIDS hypothesis, they didn't give us the test. Now,
they didn't give it to us; they sold it to us.
Now, who sold it to us? Who gets the money out of the
Gallo himself was getting quite a bit off of it. He had to give a lot back to Montagnier when it was finally proven that he stole the virus from Montagnier in the first place. But Montagnier and the Pasteur Institute are getting $1, I think, or so every time that somebody gets an HIV test.
Is that test a gold standard? Will it only identify this HIV virus?
If you get it twice in a row, you have a pretty good chance of getting a plus one time and a minus the next. I mean, it is not. It's nothing more. Even if the virus were a deadly virus, we wouldn't want to use that test to test it. I mean, that test was responsive. That's why they thought for a while that it was widespread in Africa because it cross-reacted with antibodies to malaria. That was the big, and they never went back and said, you know what, we just made a mistake there because we couldn't find the HIV-1 in the first place when we looked for it. We looked for the organism in Africa, we didn't find it. So we found something else that was close enough, 33% difference in sequence. It's not close at all, not for retroviruses. They found something else. They said, it's HIV-2, we're going to call this for a while. Now they just dropped that whole thing. They don't look for it at all anymore. You go into any kind of a like a lot of places in Africa, the only kind of place you can get any medical treatment is a WHO hospital that's there for AIDS, right? So anything you come in there for, you cut your knee with a machete, you're an AIDS patient in some little book somewhere. It's just, and presumably you have HIV too. So they'll add that.
How in the world could scientists today, legislators, physicians, public health officials, give any legitimacy to a test that's determining predictive of a person going to die of a condition, and hence put on, almost insisting to put them on antiretrovirals when there's no gold standard. If a test cross-reacts with flu, vaccines, malaria, lupus, some arthritis conditions, and connective cell conditions, leprosy, with all these other conditions they can cross-react with, then it's not a gold standard, is it?
No, it's not, but I mean, the general public doesn't understand the idea of a gold standard here. Neither do doctors, physicians. So, I mean, you just pull the average physician away from his convention someplace in Cincinnati or something, and sit down and have dinner with him and talk to him about this kind of a situation, and see how much he really knows. Like, does he know what a Western does? Does he know what a Western blot actually does? I mean, how is it different from this ELISA test? Does he understand how an ELISA test is operated? Does he understand anything about the statistics associated with the times when they've been tried? No, he doesn't. And he doesn't give a damn either. What he knows about is that when he has a patient, he charges him a certain amount of money for every treatment that he does, for every little prescription that he writes, and he likes to have a lot of patients. And the county health department also knows that due to the Ryan White Act, for every single person who is diagnosed as having AIDS in the county, $2,500 a year from the federal government. So the county health department is actually pressuring doctors by their little subtle ways. They're not coming over and beating them, but don't miss an AIDS case. You report it to us. If it's a positive test on the HIV, you report it to us because it's $2,500 in our pocket every year. I mean, it's kind of a. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why they're doing it, but one of them is not that doctors are intelligent people in this particular. I mean, the doctors have been dumb. The people that have taken the drug have been idiots also. I mean, they really are idiots. Go to some doctor, and he gives you a drug when you're not even feeling bad sometimes. You start taking it and you start feeling worse, or you start feeling bad for the first time. Keep on taking it, because otherwise you're going to get sick. And then, you read about it. It's not like you can't find out about AZT. You can find out about it. And it's not that hard to look in books like the Merck Manual and stuff like that and see, what is this stuff? What's it used for? Why are they using it here? How did it get approved?
Why is it that they would allow Western blot to be used in the United States when it's been discontinued in England because it's worthless? And why is it that they're allowing a test that there's no two countries that have the same standard of how many bands it has to be compatibly reactive with? It's 2 in one country, 3 in another, and 4 in another country. Making it very easy to test positive in one country, a little more difficult in another country.
If they didn't allow them to charge so much for it, I think there'll be a lot less use of it. I think that money is the only, it's just like in political scandals. Follow the money trail. Figure out who's getting paid for this. Who's getting the money for those Western blots. There's your person who's going to always come down on the side of, you got a confirmatory Western blots, they call it. Do a confirmatory Western blot. Well, let's see. And those things are so hokey, it's just ridiculous. I didn't know they don't even do them in England anymore.
No, they have not since 1992.
It's totally, and ask a doctor how it works. The doctor who prescribes it says, got to have a Western blot to confirm this ELISA positive thing. How does that work, doctor? Sir, what are they now measuring about me that's different from what they measured with the ELISA test? He wouldn't know. He's not got any idea. I'll bet you there's scarcely 50 physicians in this country that know what a Western blot really is. They know when to order it, and they know they get a kickback on it probably. They make some money from having to take the blood or whatever, and they make money by prescribing AZT. They get money every time they turn around. They get money. Money is what makes it work.
Interpret the test also.
Well, of course.
Why is it that a person would get a vaccine shot like hepatitis or measles to create antibodies, to get an antigen reaction, so that the body will now have a memory cell, so that when they are exposed in the future, they will be able to call upon that immune response? But when you have an antibody to the HIV virus, it's always predictive of causing the disease.
It was because, I would say, they didn't have well enough developed way to look for the virus itself at the very beginning. They could only look for the antibodies to it at first. PCR came along right about the same time that HIV did, And it was at CETUS that people started looking with PCR for HIV. That was the only way to see it, except for culture, which was a long, protracted procedure, which a lot of times didn't turn up the right. The results there weren't very good either.
Can be contaminated.
Oh, the cultures, the whole method, that cell biology is a bunch of magic half the time. And those culture, the people that say they can do quantitative estimations of HIV from cultures they're fooling themselves. But I would say the answer to the question is the antibody test was something they could quickly develop. That's what Gallo did, and sell, and so he did. And he said, we're going to make a lot of money off this. Everybody in the world is going to have to take this test to find out who's going to die of the plague. And a lot of people did take it, and he got a lot of money for it. I mean, and there's all kind of people all the way down the line getting paid for doing something that's absolutely insane. I mean, now, where is John Q. Public? He's busy playing video games or something. He's asleep at the wheel. He's not saying, what are these guys trying to pull? I thought antibodies when I was in high school were good for you. Isn't that what cures your diseases? And if we're going to make a vaccine for this thing, isn't that going to make antibodies to it? Wouldn't that be the way a vaccine would work? So if you take a vaccine for HIV, you get AIDS, don't you?
Yeah, antibody gets an antibody.
That's like ridiculous.
Okay, I got to pause it right there. Again, I encourage you to watch the rest of this. It's all great. And again, like he just said, follow the money. Again, I want to remind people about the Jesuits. The Jesuits have the Templar cross in their logo, and the Templars are the original bankers of this world. That's not disputed. That's just a fact. The Templars are the original bankers. And, it's been said before, all wars are bankers' wars. This is the war on germs, and it's had everything to do with money. All the massive lending from the central banks, all the COVID cases that generated revenue, right? If you were diagnosed with COVID, that was 15,000 immediately distributed from our government, from our taxpayer dollars and the money lent to the government. All this money just for COVID. If a hospital diagnosed with COVID, there's another 15,000. There's another 15,000. There's another 15,000. If somebody's dying from cancer for all these years and at the end they get marked as they died from COVID, then there's another 15,000. And so again, we see that this is a massive financial scheme. These guys are saying how essentially AIDS was clearly a financial scheme that benefited certain groups who were, who were part of it. If you were deemed as part of the solution to AIDS, condoms, these drugs over here, then you were in the money. Like they started with. In Africa, they know that this, and this are killing the populations, and they don't care. They're not doing anything for that. But now they're going to say it's AIDS, which has these similar systems, and they're going to bring in certain money and certain things, and they're going to give these people condoms. So there's this money scheme there, but the people are still going to die because they're really dying from these other things, like drinking from feces-infested water. And just totally ignoring those problems, right? They've invented this new problem that they have this financial scheme for. Again, it's like these guys control the world with make-believe and keeping us all invested in their make-believe. And, their methods are, there's a method to their madness. But yeah, I really do. If you haven't watched all of this, I encourage you to watch the last hour. I'd continue to play it, but I see we're getting close to 9 p.m. out here on the West Coast, close to midnight on the Eastern time. And I told Sweet Lady at 9, I'd watch a movie with her. She's studying right now. Sweet Lady, she studies all the time, but right now she's debating on just, giving up. She only has less than a year left, but she doesn't want to get the old jab. And she says, well, if this is the world we're going to live in now where you can't do anything unless you have the jab, then maybe it's time to just end it right there. And that's frustrating for her because she came over here with a mission and she's so close to the goal, and now this is happening. And, but, whatever happens, it'll be okay. And like I told her, I said, well, maybe this will be your motivation to get behind what I'm doing and understand more what I've been talking about, how if we don't do something about this world, this system's going to ruin everything for us. I think she understands that probably today more than at any other point before. And a lot of other people who didn't get where I was coming from for all these years, that they're probably starting to get where I've been coming from. unless they're just hunky-dory with tyranny and, oh, it's not that hard to go out and get the jab. I got it. It was easy. It's like, okay, you don't see what you're participating in. You don't see what that means, how you became part of the profit scheme for these tyrants, and you're just willing to bow down to their way, Realize what their way's been in the time of COVID. You're not allowed to stay open as a business, but here, fascist smart Walmart can. Again, the American people should be outraged about all this stuff, but they're not. They're just so complacent, getting their free printed out money and extra unemployment. And again, it's just, you start to see the whole thing is financial, And again, it's also about, moving us towards that thing they've been telling us forever, that one world currency, They got to get rid of the dollar, again, if you don't know, since the end of World War II, all world currencies are pegged to the dollar. If the dollar ever crashed, everyone's currency would crash, and then there'd be a reason for a new world currency. And again, this is a new world order agenda, and who's the new world order? It's the Jesuit order. They are the tip of the spear. So, my channel, I've uploaded the video. Neo the hacker, he uploaded this video, so 2 places you can watch it. I'm sure it's uploaded other places. We had a clip of this from like a year ago, and we were looking for more of it. So it's nice to finally have the full thing. But yeah, it really is amazing to watch this from start to finish and just see all the little things they pinpoint. And you're like, wow, that's like this with... Man, this is history repeating itself right here. And like I said at the beginning, I wasn't aware of any of this growing up. And of course, this whole AIDS thing was underway before I was even born, started in the 80s. I'm born in 83. But anyway, we'll leave it there for now, you guys. Date with Sweet Lady. Have a good rest of your night. And by the way, I told you this couple just told me they got married. They texted me a picture of them. They are 2 very attractive people. I got to say, I'm like, wow. That's a good looking truth seeker couple right there, man. And you know what else is funny about this couple? One is from New York, one is from the UK. So they connected through online, and then they met each other, and now the gentleman from New York, he's moved over to the UK to be with the lady. So they're worried about the vaccines becoming mandatory and then them not being able to go back and forth between countries. And I mean, that's going to come. That's going to come. So, and realize how all of this could be stopped at once if people stood up to it. It could be stopped in a day if people would just stand up to the tyranny, Are people going to stand up to the tyranny? To be honest, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like it. But I'm actually hoping that Sweet Lady decides that she just wants to start helping me out with my work, and her and I can finally travel around and pound pavement and get people to gather in cities and help form more networks, and do it fast and furious. So, to use their terminology. I see the comment in the chat, enjoy Weekend at Bernie's. I don't get that comment right now, but those movies are funny. 80s movies. All right, you guys. Oh, maybe you're saying that's a movie we're going to watch tonight. Sweet Lady, man. My one gripe about Sweet Lady is she won't watch a movie unless it's more modern. She needs that high quality picture. I'm like, a lot of these older movies have way better storylines and stuff. Sometimes I can get her to watch an older movie, especially if it's been remastered or something, but... Yeah, all the newer movies, man, it's just like so special effects driven, and I don't know, even movies that aren't, it's just like, man, what happened to good storylines and good acting? And anyway, yeah, got to spend some time with Sweet Lady, though, the balance of life. So we'll leave it there for now, you guys. If you have not watched the rest of this video, watch it when you have the time. Just listen. Pick up on all of it and just be like, wow. Just draw the parallels. And again, this man, we gotta get in contact with Gary Knoll. I gotta look into what Gary Knoll's been saying in the time of COVID. Hopefully, he hasn't become compromised in the last few decades. Again, this video is probably near 30 years old now, 25 years old. Referencing the Oklahoma City bombing in the middle of the 90s, so. But yeah, you guys, also just the topic we started with. If you got here late, just rewind the video to the beginning. The topic in the video is what I discussed at the beginning, and then I decided to show this clip. Casualties of this beast system. Truth tellers like Carrie Mullis. All right, Truth Seeker. We'll leave it there. Till next time.